Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Fantasy Football Funhouse. I'm Kevin Cotillo. Steve Marcus is here. Sal Lito is here, and we are ready to bring you another fun-filled, packed episode of Fantasy Football Talk. But before we get to that, I need to get
Did you
this
say
out
Fantasy
there.
Football Taco?
I didn't say taco, but I was going to say, Sal, Mookie Betts is on base again. So I don't know if you can get 2 tacos, but he did steal a base the other night. We were talking about this pre-show. He stole a base the other night. So on November 1st, everyone in America can go get tacos.
From 2 to 6 p.m.
Right.
That should be easy to do, right?
You're welcome from the Boston Red Sox.
No one else is going to be trying to get a taco at that time, right?
4 hours, Steve. 4 hours.
Cool.
There's a Taco Bell on like every block.
You should be able to get your 69-cent free lettuce taco in that 4-hour span. It will be possible.
It's a Doritos Locos taco.
Yeah, it's a big taco, Steve.
Okay, that ups the ante just a little bit. But think of how many people are going to waste so much time out of their day trying to get this stupid taco.
Won't you be one of them?
Right now.
You'll be one of them.
No, I will not.
I
will be standing outside Taco Bell drive-thru with a sign that says, "What are you doing with your time?"
You know who's going to be there, Steve? All the people that stand outside of your job every day.
That's right.
You know why Steve's going to be there? Because he's going to say to his wife, "Look, honey, I got to go get the taco. So you take care of the 2 kids for a little while. I got to go get the taco." It's going to give you an hour away from the baby. I mean,
that sounds like a good idea.
Kevin, as we're recording this tonight, Kevin will most likely be distracted as the Red Sox are playing the Dodgers in the World Series. And I thought about this the other day, and I meant to ask you. And then tonight, they had the 2004 team there to throw first pitch. Did you happen to see that?
I didn't. I was with my daughter, so she ruined everything for me tonight, and I did not get to watch the show.
All right, well, welcome. That's your officially welcome to parenthood at that point. They take you away from your sporting events. Well, they had Big Poppy was out there, and I believe Kevin Millar and a few other guys, and Dave Roberts ran out in his Dodgers uniform to hug all of them. And I meant to ask you, how is it seeing Dave Roberts? Dave Roberts, by the way, who had probably the most important stolen base in Red Sox history.
Yeah, he will always be a legend here. He will always be revered here, no matter what. I don't have any ill will towards him, of course. I don't have any ill will towards the Dodgers, really, because I don't know. I mean, there's the Dodgers. The LA fans don't even care about the Dodgers. Why should I worry about them? So they're not. It's not like they're a rival up for us. That whole LA Boston thing it's more for more basketball based, right? The Lakers Celtics is a huge rivalry, but again, we don't really care about the Dodgers. And Dave Roberts, as you mentioned, is part of one of the most amazing plays and amazing things in sports that I've ever watched in my entire life. So I will forever hold him to an incredibly high standard, and I'm glad that he ran out there and shook all those guys' hands because that team was amazing.
They didn't shake hands. Hugs. Brothers don't shake hands. Brothers got a hug.
I mean, and they do, because that team was amazing.
I am not a Dodgers fan. Being a Giants fan, obviously, I'm not allowed to like the Dodgers, but I feel like the Dodgers are just the Dallas Cowboys of the baseball world. They were good a long time ago, and now they're just a name, and they spend a lot of money on a bunch of players, and they try and be important. And every once in a while, they get pretty good, and this is what we're seeing these last couple of years.
I was going to say, they made the playoffs like 5 years in a row.
6, yeah. I think this is the 6th year
they're in a pretty good stretch, right? This is like their Tony Romo time, where Clayton Kershaw is like their Tony Romo. And
can't win the big one, eh, Clayton?
That's right. That's right. So I'm rooting for them to lose yet again.
All right, enough of this baseball talk. We should get on to football talk, Kevin.
I appreciate that you're wearing your into fitness shirt again, by the way, Sal. You seem to wear that on podcast nights. I just want to point that out.
My beautiful baby girl gave me this, and I like to wear it, even though she's probably never listened to a single or watched a single
Kevin,
episode.
Do you have the sleeves cut off of that hoodie?
The world may never know. All right, so we're going to get into some football, but before we do, I want to remind everyone to go over to gridironexperts.com and check out all of their stuff. We are part of the Gridiron Experts podcast family. We love being a part of that family because it's a great place to be. I mean, they get us stuff out there with some other, probably fair to say, more talented podcasters. And
fair. That is absolutely fair to say.
Yeah. So there's good stuff.
I don't know.
There.
I hung out with that Michael Hoff from FF Face Off one night in Brooklyn. I don't know. He's a good guy. I don't know if he's talented.
Well, I mean, he may not be talented, but their show's got to be
He
better,
can
right?
drink, though. The guy can drink. I'll give him that much.
Well, that's worth checking it out as well. They got plenty of stuff over there, though, at gridironexperts.com. You can check out all of the updated news. They have daily fantasy stuff. They have fantasy rankings. As I mentioned, there's the FF Face Off. There's the Bittersweet Fantasy Football Podcast, and then there's the that FF Fun House Podcast. Whatever those guys are. There's NFL picks, and of course, you can go over to the store, Sal, and buy some different T-shirts.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm buying some now.
If you wanted to get some different T-shirts to wear on a podcast night, you can go over to Gridiron Experts and click on their store link. They have some pretty awesome fantasy related gear there, so go check them out. Those guys are great, and we love being a part of the family. Sal, you have. I'm led to believe you have handwritten notes again.
Never fail. I have stolen many pens from work, so I never run out of ink. I'm good to go.
Whoever that is that makes notebooks, he's keeping Mead in business like single-handedly with all the notebooks he has to buy.
Hold on a second. I'll let you know who.
I feel like that's going to be on his tombstone, right? He never ran out of ink.
This one was made by Wexford, Steve. Wexford. Yeah, guys, it's been an interesting couple of days in NFL with players moving around. The Giants are having a fire sale right here in New York. They traded away a very recent first-round draft pick in Eli Apple over to the New Orleans Saints. I saw someone post on Twitter live shot of Eli Apple in his new uniform, and it was a Saints garbage can. It was just, with the Saints logo printed on there. So people are not. It's actually, I think it said when you wanted Patrick Peterson and you ended up with Eli Apple. They traded Snacks Harrison today. Snacks Harrison for a 5th rounder.
That's an incredible deal.
It's a steal. It's an absolute steal for Detroit. That's a great move. That guy is a stud lineman, and he has been for about 5 years. But let's talk about some of the fantasy relevant.
Wait. Before we get to that, can I just say, remember when everyone thought Detroit was terrible? And, when the Patriots lost to them, and they were like, how'd they lose such a bad team? That's going to be a good team down the stretch. That's a tough out. Detroit is a tough out.
Everyone remembers them losing to the Jets, and that seems to be all they remember about them. They lost that game and their season was over. But they've actually been pretty decent, like Kevin said.
I'll read to you guys later, and it should be out on Fanball today. That's right for Fanball.
Do you? I heard that somewhere. Where did I hear that? Maybe the last episode?
Probably everywhere. My landmine quarterback for the week was Matthew Stafford. In fact, you know what? I have it open now. Let me just click on that. And,
wait, while you're doing that, I'm going to click on his box score.
And click again. And I'm going to click one more time on this.
What are you doing, Kev?
I'm looking up his box score to see what kind of stats he had for this landmine.
No, I have him this week.
Oh, this week. Oh, okay.
This upcoming week. And basically, the long and short of it is that over the last few weeks, right? So the first 2 weeks of the season, he had 46 passing attempts and 53 passing attempts, and they were 0-2. Over the last 4 weeks, his pass attempts are 36, 30, 26, and 22. And we've seen what the running game has become there, and they're 3-1. So my point is, I expect this to be a new balanced offense going forward because they're winning. It's a different mindset there with Patricia. And I don't think Stafford's going to be a weekly QB1 for you. I don't think that you could rely on that. I think he's maybe matchup dependent. And I love what they're doing with Kerryon Johnson now that Theo Riddick's been banged up. I don't like that because I have Theo Riddick in a lot of places, but you can expect that going forward because as the attempts go down, the wins go up. There's no denying it.
I think.
Go right ahead, Steve.
I was going to say, I think that has a lot to do with how Kerryon Johnson has played the last few weeks. And I think that has been something that the Detroit has always wanted to do. They've wanted to rely on that run game, and they just have not been able to, which is why Stafford, everything's kind of relied on him. But now that Kerryon Johnson has gotten there and he's been very efficient in his running and he's looked so good, that has forced them to not have to rely on Stafford so much. And he's been able to sit back and has seemed to be more efficient because of it. But I agree, the lack of volume means that his fantasy prowess, I guess.
Nice word.
His fantasy prowess would be it diminished a little bit because he's not having to throw the ball quite so much.
I have some carry-on numbers when we get to the running backs later. We'll talk about him a little bit more in depth.
Ooh. That's a tease.
That is a tease. That's a pretty good tease. You're pretty good at that, Sal. You should do that again sometime.
Come up and see me sometime.
Well, not like not like that. That's
That's
just
wrong
now
kind
it's
of-
weird.
wrong kind of-
Now it's weird.
So Kevin's the guy Kevin was really high on coming into this year.
Oh crap!
Amari Cooper
Which one?
was traded to the Dallas Cowboys. And while I've been really hard on the Raiders and John Gruden in particular to get a #1 draft pick for a player who's been in the league 4 years now and has been severely underperforming, and last time I saw him needed to be removed from the field with help, is great. But you must remember this: a kiss is just that's not.
Well, that's not where we're going.
Amari Cooper is 1 full year younger than Cooper Kupp. Amari Cooper is only 6 months older than Calvin Ridley. So while it is crazy to see a #1 pick get moved in the NFL for a wide receiver these days, he's young. He has made 2 Pro Bowls. We all know he does have talent, right? It's just got to be honed. I don't know if they're going to do that in Dallas. As a Raider fan, watching everything that's going on this year, I'm not happy to see Cooper go because I really did love the pick when they took him, and I really did have high hopes for him. And I had high hopes with this team before Gruden was brought in. So it is sad for me to see him go and see all the guys that are slowly being traded away. I think Derek Carr will go regardless of what is being said, at least in the offseason. He won't be there any longer. But, Kevin, what is Amari Cooper's outlook rest of season and beyond in Dallas?
I think for the rest of the season, it's going to be tough, right? If you're in redraft leagues, I think, he's going to be learning a new playbook. Obviously, you're coming up on your second week without him now because as he goes into the second bye week for him. But when he comes off of it, that helps because it'll give him a little extra time to get in the playbook and learn. But he's not going to have necessarily a connection with Dak unless it's one of those weird ones that sparks immediately. So I could see some struggles the rest of the season. It's not really a great outlook. However, having said that, I do think that Dak Prescott is the type of quarterback that he should play with, right? And it should help improve Dak's position a little bit. And the reason I say that is because we all know that Dak's not the type of guy that's going to throw anyone open, right? He's not really great at throwing that ball where the receiver has to do the work or, in jump ball situations or leading a guy to get open, right? He needs a receiver to gain separation so he can see it and then throw it, right? That seems to be the way he is. And Amari Cooper is a guy that can get separation from defensive backs. I know that this year has been a little bit of a struggle for him. I think that might have a little bit to do with, the Gruden offense and what they're asking him to do and that kind of thing is just not being a good fit, which is one of the reasons he's no longer with the team. And the year before that, I mean, yes, that was down too, but I blame most of that on Derek Carr and his bad back and some struggles there. He was 1,000-yard. He had 2,000-yard seasons to start his career. So the guy's talented. He can separate. He can run great routes. That was his deal coming out of college. He was a great route runner. So I think that will help him, and it will help Dak ultimately. So long-term outlook, I don't know if it's better than what he was, but it's certainly not any worse.
I will tell you that he has found his most success playing out of the slot, and obviously that's where Cole Beasley plays in Dallas. So I would look for Cole Beasley not to return to Dallas next year, and I look for it as a long-term play for Cooper. Kevin, I don't know if you remember this trade we had in the offseason in the Dynasty League, but you sent me $425. I sent you back Amari Cooper, Jordan Howard, and Jake Butt. How's that trade turning out for you?
That looks good for me right now. I thought I won that deal for sure when that happened. Not that I won. I actually thought it was pretty fair. You were looking for some cash.
Fair amount of money that I got back.
You got a good amount of money. You're rebuilding-ish. And I am apparently rebuilding now too. So
over in the Falafel Assholes League, Steve, do you have something you want to say on that subject?
I was just going to say, from a football standpoint, I think that Dallas, everyone's kind of harping on them for giving up a first-round pick, but like you just said, Calvin Ridley was a first-round pick last year, right? And Cooper's just right around that same age, and they were probably going to screw that pick up anyway. So now you've got some Cooper caliber type player, And there for the Raiders side of the ball, like you said, John Gruden's selling all these players off, but over the next 2 years, he's got 5 first-round draft picks now, so he can build this team how he wants. And then if it all goes up in flames, we know who to blame.
It'll be up in flames just in time for Vegas.
That's right.
You talked about it though, Steve. The first-round pick that they got or that the Dallas gave up, everyone wanted them to use the first-round pick this year on a wide receiver. So there you go. There's your first-round wide receiver that everyone was looking for.
So another trade I made in the offseason in the fall.
Oh, sorry. Did I cut you off from talking about yourself further?
I made this trade with
Steve. We need to get more Sal on here.
I made the trade with
Fanball. I don't know if you knew that.
trade with you, Steve Marcus. And I believe I'm winning that. I believe I'm winning that trade too. That trade was I sent you Chad Kelly and you sent me back Michael Roberts, who is clearly the new best tight end in all of football. He's got 4 catches and 3 of them are for touchdowns in 2018.
What a garbage deal that still is. It was
and
garbage.
Chad Kelly not currently on a team anymore.
So I want to read this. I want to read this as it's written. Now ex-teammate Von Miller had a Halloween party Monday night. Kelly apparently got too intoxicated, had a physical altercation with a guest and then security. The 24-year-old somehow then ended up in a stranger's residence, sitting on the couch, mumbling incoherent words. I also heard that the woman came across him while holding her baby in her hands and grabbed an attachment to a vacuum cleaner and hit him in the back of the head with it repeatedly. Steve, this was a guy who showed such promise preseason. This was a guy that it was really not far-fetched to say could unseat Case Keenum as the starting quarterback. And I'll say I applaud John Elway for just saying, hey, cutting ties right away. He called Jim Kelly before drafting him and asked him his opinion. He vouched for him. He took his word for him. And the minute he stepped out of line, he got rid of him. So you have to say that you have to commend him for that because he's not going to keep that type of an element around a team. But how do you feel about this, seeing as you're a Denver fan? And do you think Chad Kelly gets another chance somewhere else?
I mean, first of all, you guys never ended up in some weird person's living room? Never?
What are you saying about my mother?
I plead the fifth.
There we go. I knew you'd have my back on this one, Kevin. No. Very unfortunate turn of events. Chad Kelly, a huge question mark coming into the draft, which is why Denver got him where they did in the draft as Mr. Irrelevant 2 years ago. Unfortunate to see it go down like this, but with someone that had the baggage that he had, I'm happy with that. Elway was able to just cut bait right away and not drag it out any further and have that cloud sitting over them. It was very unfortunate. It seemed like it was getting closer and closer to him. Like his name was popping up more and more as Denver's season's gone on. It's kind of a lost season for them. So it's unfortunate. I do think he'll land on someone else's team, if not just on their practice squad, because he's a guy that can throw the ball in the NFL. They're pretty rare these days. So I think he'll get an opportunity, but I don't know what his future holds. And as far as a dynasty holder of him, I've got him in a few spots. I wish I would have sold him a couple weeks ago now because I had some people asking about him. And I, being the Denver fan, being a believer in him, I held on to him, and it's kind of come to bite me now.
All right, let's move on to, here's an interesting stat I saw today. The Arizona Cardinals are averaging 13.1 points a game. The Los Angeles Rams are winning by 15.28 points. Game. They're winning their games by 2 points more than the Cardinals are actually scoring in a game in a year where offenses are exploding. The Arizona Cardinals are just embarrassingly miserable.
That is rough.
It's sad.
Rough. Poor David Johnson.
I hope that Josh Rosen doesn't turn into David Carr because he's getting destroyed. That offensive line is a joke. The offensive coordinator, thank God he was fired, obviously, Mike McCoy. What's funny is Mike McCoy was a good offensive coordinator at one point in his career, right? I mean, what team was it? Was it the Chargers that he had some success with? I mean, he was good at one point, wasn't he?
He was with the Chargers, yeah. But I also read today where Frank Reich was the person who was being held back at Mike McCoy's expense. It was Frank Reich's expense that Mike McCoy was the offensive coordinator there. So who knows? He's been fired 3 times, I believe, in the last 2 years. So That's
Yeah, I'd
not
say
saying.
he's probably coach in high school at this point, right?
Here's a great quote I saw from George Kittle today. He said he had to score a touchdown last week because his fantasy coaches needed more points from him. So it's always great when you see one of the players, embrace the fantasy community. That was a great little quote. I want to throw that in there. All right, let's move on to some players that are suffering injuries. Very, very sad to see this today about Bilal Powell. This will be a wait and see. So Bilal Powell has to have neck surgery, and it's a good possibility that he may never play football again. It's very similar injury to the Quincy Enunwa injury, but a little bit worse. And it was put out today that there's a real, legit possibility he's played his last down in the NFL. Bilal Powell has been a serviceable NFL running back, and at times a very good fantasy pass catching running back. And you never want to see that happen to a guy before their time or in general at all. So that was very sad news.
That's tough. I feel bad because when you originally said that you were upset about Bilal Powell, I shook my head because I was like, who would be upset about losing Bilal Powell from their fantasy team? But obviously when you hear that the guy's, career is in jeopardy, that sucks. You never want to hear that. Feel bad for the guy. Good little fantasy player in his time, and hopefully, wish him the best as far as his recovery.
Looks early indication that Cooper Kupp is out again for this week, so that hurts those of us who own him in key places. Albert Wilson, who had started to come on a little bit, has been put on the IR. Jakeem Grant is a guy you definitely want to keep an eye on because he got a lot of usage. In fact, a career high this week once Albert Wilson did leave the game. Peyton Barber is out with an ankle, and it's 50-50 right now that he'll play in week 8. Well, guess who scored a touchdown last week?
Ronald Jones.
Yeah, buddy.
Steve didn't even hit the buzzer, so you got to hit the buzzer before you yell it out.
Yeah, you can't just say things.
I'm sorry. I got a little excited.
In fact, I'm pretty sure your role in the show is to not say things.
That's true.
Now, let me ask you guys.
How foolish of me.
Is Ronald Jones a thing? Should Ronald Jones be added now? Should you make sure you have him on your team? And is it going to be the Ronald Jones show going forward?
What kind of team and what kind of league are we talking about, right? A deep league?
32-team dynasty? I'm just kidding.
32-team dynasty, you should be excited that you have him on your roster because he's going to get a chance eventually. I have him in Falafel, which is obviously a 16-team running back deficient league, and he will be on my bench because there's no way I'm getting rid of him. I'd like to see him get some more carries if he's working in practice. If he shows a little spark, they should be willing to give him more touches pretty easily, right? Peyton Barber hasn't really set the world on fire. He had one good game so far this season. So at any point, they should be ready to make that switch, right, to the second-round running back.
I mean, anything higher than a 10-team league, I think you should have him on a bench. I don't see why not. Running backs still you said Falafel's a running back efficient league. Running backs are the most important position to be stacked at if you can in all fantasy leagues, I feel. So if you can get a guy that might have a chance later on in the season to get 12 to 15 carries a game, I think you got to get him on your bench now.
Speaking of Falafel, I lost Devonta Freeman there, as we all know. I put him on IR, and then I saw the report last week about Marshawn Lynch before they just called it a strain or a groin strain or whatever. And so I decided to add Doug Martin. And as it comes out now, after the bye week, Lynch is on IR, and they're saying Doug Martin is going to be a workhorse back or the lead back, but this is John Gruden. And he also told his players they weren't trading Amari Cooper, and they did. So, guys, give me your opinion on that. He's going to be starting for me now because I have Melvin Gordon on the bye week this week, so I have to plug in a running back. So I have him in there, and they got him projected at like 10 to 11 points right off the bat on ESPN. Kevin, what are your feelings on Doug Martin? We know Richard will get all the reception work, and they did finally activate DeAndre Washington, who has not played yet this year. But what do you think is going to break down there in Oakland?
I think Gruden's just crazy enough to actually mean what he says about Doug Martin. I mean, I've always liked Doug Martin. I know that he's screwed a lot of people throughout fantasy through the years, but I've always been a fan of Doug Martin. I don't know what he has left in the tank. I don't know if he has anything left in the tank. We haven't really seen him play much this year. He's getting very limited carries behind Marshawn Lynch. but I think he'll be the first guy in. I don't know that Gruden has any allegiances to any of the guys on the roster, the DeAndre Washingtons or the Jalen Richards. Richard has seemed in the past to be the most explosive, so you would think he'd get some touches. He's probably going to be utilized in the passing game still. So, but yeah, if I were you, I'd be running out Doug Martin as well. And I think anything, even with some of the bye weeks this week, maybe even in a 12-team league, he might be startable.
Yeah, we'll get into it more tomorrow or Friday, whenever we do the preview show. But Colts really, really bad at pass catching running backs this year. So I think it is a big Jalen Richard game. I think it's both, because they don't have a lot of other weapons there now with Amari Cooper gone and a bunch of old men manning the wide receiver position. Steve, back over in Denver.
Yes.
Royce Freeman suffering from a high ankle sprain. And it's
wait, I'm sorry. I was on mute and I was trying to go back to that game for just 1 second. I just want to point out that they are playing the Colts. So we all know that
vaunted defense.
Yeah.
That's true.
It's going to be tough sledding all around. So
it's highly unlikely that Royce Freeman's going to play this weekend.
Yes.
Which gives Philip Lindsay the full run there in Denver. What are the chances Lindsay's so damn good that they trade Freeman? No, that Freeman has trouble getting equal touches once he gets back from the ankle sprain.
I don't know. It seemed like the last couple of weeks Freeman has kind of gotten back into that 50-50 role, whereas Lindsay at the beginning of the season, he really came on and it seemed like he might have been taking that job over right at the start. They've really done a good job at getting them both equal work. I think that Lindsay has a great chance to take hold of this job. It's going to be interesting to see because, he came in as kind of a change of pace back from Freeman, even though he was getting a lot of work. And so now offenses are going to be able to hone in on him and focus in on him more. So I'm interested to see how he responds to that, how he plays being that number one back. We know Devontae Booker was also showing up from time to time and, taking a few snaps here or there. So I expect his workload to increase a little bit as well. But I'm really interested to see what Lindsay does. And, it's not going to take work away from Freeman. He was a high draft pick. I think Denver really likes the way that he runs. He's not done, he's not been a bad back. He just hasn't been as explosive as Lindsay. But I don't think he's going to lose his job. He might just lose a little bit. It might take a little longer to get him back.
All right, before we move on, I don't know if we mentioned it last week, but it looks like Leonard Fournette is, people worried to see a lot of backs get put on IR. Leonard Fournette will be back after Jacksonville's bye, so I believe week 9 or 10. Are they on bye this week or next
Their
week?
bye week is week 9. So they're playing this week, then they're They're
back in week 10. And also Dalvin Cook now is said to believe to be held out through the bye week and will be back in week 11. So 2 highly drafted running backs, 2 second-year players that I don't have any Leonard Fournette. I have him in a wacky league where I didn't draft him, but I was given him based on picking a number. I have him and Le'Veon Bell in that league. Oh, my God, what a tough – I got those 2 guys, and I thought I'd be sitting pretty, but it's been awful. But, it kind of sucks to lose those 2 guys. Those are realistically 2 guys you could have gotten at the wraparound pick at the end of the first round. That's a very realistic possibility, and your season is in the crapper right now. So before we move on to getting into the individual positions, we've talked about the Quan Edge a lot on here. They've been a very good sponsor of our show, and I usually get into the DFS aspect of it, which, by the way, Kevin, you did great in DFS. You put together a DFS lineup this week that was very impressive. It won you the Supremacy or the Power Hungry League, or both.
Both, Sal. It won me Supremacy, Power Hungry, and Empire, which you're not in. But yes, I won all 3.
He came to me looking for help, and he kicked my ass.
And then I didn't put it in any spots where I could have actually won some actual money. So that was nice.
That was definitely a double up quality lineup. You would have definitely been able to double up your money in pretty much any contest you entered. But TQE does a lot more than just daily fantasy sports, and they released this past Friday. They released their betting tool. I don't know if you guys had a chance to check out their betting tool, but I'll tell you this right off the bat: they went 12-2 with that betting tool this week. 12-2. You almost couldn't not win money if you.
That's way
if
better
you
than Steve.
Yeah,
Way
no,
better.
much better than Steve.
Oh, yeah.
So they launched this, and the betting tool is separate. It's $49.99 a month, but with results like that, it's worth it. But if you use our same code, if you use our same password of FF Funhouse, you'll get $10 off the first month there as well. They have NBA. They've been crushing it with the NBA slates. I mean, these guys, they're winning people money. There's really no reason for you not to go to thequantedge.com now. Sign up using that code, FF Funhouse. Start winning money. It's silly. It's why are you going to work every day when it's this easy to win money?
I'm not.
It's true. Okay. That's true. Steve is not going to work every day.
Good. Yeah. Sally, you go to work. Just throwing that out there.
I do go to work.
Are you not taking your own advice?
No, I like extra money. Well, I go to work for the benefits, medical benefits.
I gotcha.
Quad Edge unfortunately has not given out medical benefits yet, but I hear it's a possibility in 2019.
Fanball hasn't set up with 401k yet.
Yeah, what's up with that?
It's like a
employer-based healthcare, right?
It's like a 200.5. It's not quite a full. I did that math myself real quick right there. So, guys, let's talk about some quarterbacks.
Check out Sal's.
That's right, an author page. I feel like somebody.
Can I write your next profile for your author page? Will they let me do that?
I don't think that it even has a profile on there.
I hope there's no picture.
Whatever I've written. Guys, let's talk about quarterbacks. Let's get into Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck, believe it or not, is the number 3 overall quarterback on the season, and he's been playing really, really well. He has passed for nearly 2,000 yards and 20 touchdowns, and he's done that with like spare parts, right? Like his weapons have not even been there. We've joked about Eric Ebron and how amazing he's been in the red zone, and he leads the NFL in receiving touchdowns for tight ends. But we all know that Jack Doyle's a guy that is a crutch for Andrew Luck, and he'll be back this week, we think. Early indications is he'll be back. T.Y. Hilton came back this past week. Didn't have a huge yardage day, but got 2 touchdowns. Marlon Mack came back. We'll get into Marlon Mack a little bit when we get to the running backs. That was a nice big turnaround for him. So what I'm saying here is, outside of Patrick Mahomes, who's having, by the way, averaging the most points for a season in fantasy football history.
It's like 27 points a game right now.
No one has ever averaged higher than that in fantasy football history. Aside from him, who else would you want right now with all those? Would Andrew Luck do that with spare parts and all these weapons coming back? Kevin, I know how you feel about him. Would you want anybody else right now, or are you buying him up wherever you can?
Yeah. I don't really trade for quarterbacks too often in redraft leagues. So I guess in redraft leagues, we can get that out of the way. If you're talking about dynasty, I would be buying him up if there's anyone. I think the people that own him have stuck with him for this long, and they're not up for considering he's sort of trending back towards what he was. So I'd love to buy him if I can. Luckily, I still own him in a couple places, and I'm happy to have him. And I think I'm going to keep him. But from there on out, yeah, if you can get him for a reasonable price, I'd be buying him. I'm all in still because I don't think he's going anywhere. I think the offense will get better, particularly next year. And I think in this year he's going to throw it a lot because they don't have a great running game, and their offensive line has been better. And it's really the only way to keep themselves in games. I mean, they're playing great defense and throwing the ball all over the place.
That's the thing. Their defense is giving Andrew Luck so many more opportunities with how stout they've been.
Right. It's just the takeovers. They're so.
No, I agree. Andrew Luck has been great. He was a great value for your redraft leagues this year because you were able to get him in like the 9th or 10th round in some leagues, depending on how deep they were. I think I would still lean towards the Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, maybe not Tom Brady as much, but Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, definitely guys that I would probably still have ahead of him. But he is definitely in that top 10 range. And we say that now. He's had a good stretch of a run, a big stretch run these last few weeks. He was up a little, 16 earlier on in the season, but definitely seems like things have gotten together. There's been a lot of talk this week about how their offensive line has done really well. I think he's got 125 consecutive passes without being sacked, which is huge for him because we all know how much he was being sacked early on in his career. So I think it's awesome to see him coming back, and I hope that it continues because I've got him in a few spots, and seeing him play well is always fun.
I would maybe put Tom Brady ahead of Aaron Rodgers. Since you brought up Aaron Rodgers, that's somebody I was going to bring up because Aaron Rodgers comes in as the 11th overall quarterback on the season. And we know the issue with the weapons there as well. They've had a lot of injuries, specifically to the wide receiver core, and to Aaron Rodgers himself. Now, he had the bye week. I'm sure he's gotten plenty of rest. We'll see how he comes back. It's Aaron Rodgers. I don't expect him to ever be too far off. But Tom Brady is the number 5 overall quarterback. And over the last 3 weeks, he's been a number 2 overall quarterback in fantasy football. And he is a guy who's getting a ton of weapons, not only back, but new weapons being brought in. Now, unfortunately, we saw what happened with Sony Michel this week, who was off to a really promising start to his career. So we're sure they're going to shift the focus more to James White and passing the ball. So I'm happy to have Brady in a couple of leagues where I have him because he seemingly never gets old. But, Kevin, what do you think about Aaron Rodgers and being 11th overall through 7 weeks?
Some positive regression, right? I mean, I think you can expect that the knee injury affected him a little bit in the beginning of the season, after it initially occurred. And I think that he'll probably get a little bit better and have some of those big Aaron Rodgers type healthy coming to rebound. I don't think he'll finish 11th overall. I think he'll still finish in the top 6, 5, somewhere in that range, right? And so you're going to see some bigger games in order to see him get up there.
Yeah, I can't say I disagree with that. We talked about this guy last week.
His wide receivers, that's part of the problem. He's been without he's had Devontae Adams, but been without Geronimo Allison and Randall Cobb for a couple of weeks now, so that doesn't help.
What about Marquez Valdez-Scantling?
Also dinged up.
Well, I traded him at the right time. We talked about this guy last week, and I want to bring him up again because he did it again, and that's Mitchell Trubisky. Mitchell Trubisky, while he's the number 9 overall quarterback on the season, he's the number 1 overall quarterback over the last 5 weeks. And in the last 5 weeks, he's put up in ESPN scoring 43.5, 27.3, and 31.4. He's doing it a lot with his legs, Steve. He ran for 81 yards on a touchdown this past week. I know that there was a guy, we brought it up last week, 3 straight 300-yard games that you like to break people's balls about, the Bears fans. And you said last week you saw it as a good it going in a good direction for him. Is this a guy that people should just be putting in a lineup every week right now? Or should they still be playing matchups?
I would definitely still be playing matchups. You mentioned his rushing, and I think that has been a lot of what's kept his fantasy numbers looking the way that they have. We all commented and saw what he did on Sunday with his nice run where he changed direction on the field and was able to get into the end zone. That was nice. But at one point in that game, he was 4 for 15 with 43 yards passing. Like, that is not good at all. So from a fantasy standpoint, if he's going to keep running, then yeah, he's going to have some weeks where he's a quarterback 1 and he might be able to string those together, but he's not somebody that I would feel comfortable just putting in there each and every week because there's also some games earlier on in the season where he was not so good. And I think that until we can see that he can be a consistent quarterback, I think that is when I'd feel comfortable with just putting him in week to week. As of right now, it'd be playing matchups and I still wouldn't feel super comfortable with it.
Yeah, he had his worst completion percentage game of the year, 52%. But in the previous 5 games, 65, 73, 68, 73, 71. He's been very consistent in completing passes. And he does have 3 straight 300-yard games. So those rushing yards are phenomenal. If he could consistently get 5 points a game rushing the ball, who's not going to like that? But he's done a really good job. I'm with you. I don't know that I'm ready to just be like, oh, Mitchell Trubisky's my guy putting Carson Wentz on the bench. I don't think I'm there either. But it's definitely a nice surprise for people who went with the late QB strategy.
It's one of those situations where fantasy just doesn't match up with the real sport, though, right? I know I made our friend Rob angry when I subsequently said that Bortles was better than him. But honestly, did you watch it? I mean, did you guys watch that? I watched the whole Patriots game as opposed to just snippets from Red Zone. He was not good. He was not good in that game at all. He looked like a bad quarterback.
A lot of it came late. Yeah.
I mean, but obviously that doesn't matter in fantasy, which is what we're here to talk about. I just want to throw that out there. I mean, that's going to catch up to him eventually, I think. Although I did say that about Bortles for years, and now it has finally come to that.
Yeah, poor Bortles. Not been a good week for my friend. Speaking about fantasy,
the country.
Speaking about fantasy, not necessarily replicating reality. While things are on fire here in New York, Eli Manning against Atlanta completed 71% of his passes for 399 yards. Now, he only had the one touchdown at the last possible second of the game to Odell Beckham. But, I was going to bring this up later when I got to the wide receivers from that game. With it being as bad as it is there, and Barkley seemingly not being able to run behind that line at all. I mean, he's getting hit 3, 4, 5 yards behind the line before he even gets – and they're basically using the pass game as a short running game with Barkley. It's the only way they can get the ball into his hands in space. Is it possible that Eli Manning, in a kind of a chunk time, necessary to throw the ball kind of way, is a fantasy relevant quarterback going down a stretch?
Their defense is.
Kev, we're losing you. We're losing you a little bit here and there. You're chopping in and out a little bit, so we didn't hear that part. Go ahead.
I was saying that the defense is going to get worse, right? So a lot worse as they continue to sell off pieces. So I would imagine that Eli might, just based on volume, trying to play catch up from every single game that they're going to be behind. That might help, but I don't know that I'm willing to trust him in my lineup every day.
Yeah, I feel the same way. That the potential is there for him to, he has Odell Beckham. He's got weapons on his team. So he has the possibility, but he's had the possibility for a couple years now. And for some reason, he never seems to put it together. Yeah, he'll have these big games where he blows up and has a good yardage and the touchdowns. But I do not feel comfortable. I would not feel comfortable putting him in my lineup. I think I'd probably rather start Trubisky.
Yeah, I can't argue with that, Steve. Yeah, so Odell Beckham Jr. this week was the number one wide receiver in fantasy. 11 targets, 8 receptions, 143 yards, and a touchdown. And number 7, not too far behind him, was Sterling Shepard. He had 8 targets, 5 receptions for 167 yards. So maybe it means good things for the weapons and not necessarily Eli.
Not a good secondary they were playing against.
No, one of the worst for sure. Let's talk about the Colts backfield. Kevin, this is a backfield you've hated. There's not a guy there that you like. Every time I bring a name up and a new guy and I put them on my roster, you have nothing nice to say about them. But Marlon Mack was back. He's been back for 2 weeks now. This week he played 56% of the snaps. It's a career high for him. And he got 22 opportunities. That's carries and targets combined. So he had 19 carries for 126 yards. He averaged 6.6 yards a carry and scored a touchdown rushing. He also caught 2 balls for 33 yards, and he scored a touchdown receiving as well. A week ago, he got 12 carries for 89 yards, and he averaged 7.4 yards a carry. So we've said this in the past, and your argument has been he's a big play guy. He'll make big plays, but he won't be able to be consistent. It's only 2 games. Naheem Hines' percentage has gone down to 26%. Jordan Wilkins was at 23%. Neither guys did anything of significance. It looks like it's going to be Marlon Mack's backfield. How do you feel about him at this point, Kevin, after seeing those 2 games? And is he a guy that you'd have in there as your RB2 right now?
RB2? No, because in all honesty, if you've gone this far in the season, you did not need him as an RB2 because he hasn't played, right? He's only been in 3 games. So you're not depending on him as an RB2 yet. Why would you depend on him as an RB2?
Because Melvin Gordon's on bye.
I think he sure. So this one was for the season, was it not? I mean, I've been called out on not listening lately on this program. So if that wasn't the question, then I believe
rest of the way going forward, do you consider him an RB2? Yes,
yeah. So I mean, I think he can be, but I don't think he's a guy that I'm locking into that RB2 spot. I think I'll play the matchups. Third again. He's a rotation guy for me. Then how about that? Is that a better way to say it? Rotation.
That's fair.
We Steve, don't be insulted. I'm going to go back to Kevin on this question. We spoke about the injuries to Sony Michel. James White got a career high. 11 carries was his career high. He got those this week. He posted 40 yards rushing. He had his typical 8 receptions, 52 yards, 2 touchdowns. My question for you, Kevin, is not anything about James White because he should be in your lineup every week. But while Sony Michel is down, however long that may be, do you see Kenyon Bonner as a guy people should be adding or relevant? Somebody asked me this question, and I told them, if you're desperate, you have an empty roster spot, he's not a must-add. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't fab on him. I wouldn't have wasted a waiver position on him. A deep league, I would say it's got to be at least 14 or probably even 16 where I'd start looking at him as a guy that you need to add. But I do think he'll have some value because while Sony's out, the problem is you don't know how long Sony's going to be out for. There's no structural damage in the knee. The Patriots are obviously going to be tight-lipped about this situation. We have no idea when he'll be back. And you're not going to know until he's basically back on the field. So, I mean, situation this week, as Steve pointed out, with Melvin Gordon on bye and that kind of thing, and you really have no running backs. He's a guy that you might be able to plug in on a Monday game, but that's about it. I wouldn't expect anything else out of him.
Patriots tight-lipped. I'm shocked. I'm very shocked.
I think I have a feeling that Sony Michel is going to be back within a couple of weeks.
This week.
It's not
doesn't
this week.
look like this week, but I don't disagree with Kevin.
You know why? Because they don't need him. They don't need him to play the Bills. Let's be honest.
Yeah,
it's true.
They could have Steve line up in the backfield and beat the Bills.
Now standing in the backfield in a puddle of his own piss. Steve, over in Cleveland, Nick Chubb got his first opportunity as the lead running back.
Yeah.
Word was that it would be a bigger Duke Johnson game. I even thought that myself. Just his first game, I thought would be a little bit bigger of a Duke Johnson game. And they had it listed as the starting running back, but Duke Johnson got 1 carry for -4 yards. He saw 4 targets, 4 receptions, 23 yards. But Nick Chubb got the bulk of the work at 18 carries, 80 yards, and a touchdown, 4.4 average. Obviously, we knew he wasn't going to continue to pick up 10 yards a clip, right? Yes. But it's respectable 4.4. He saw only the 1 target. He saw 2 targets, no catches. He's got 3 targets total, preseason included in all the games that he's played. So Duke Johnson's going to remain the pass catching guy here. It's not going to be a 3-down back situation for Chubb. But Chubb should be in there every week now, I guess, right? It should not be on your bench.
Yeah, I think he is somebody that you can instantly lock into a running back 2 at worst role just based on that type of volume. I mean, he was getting 18 carries against the Buccaneers, who they were trailing the vast majority of that game, and obviously ended up losing in overtime. But they were, losing for a long time, and he was still getting a lot of run there. And he got the cheap touchdown at the very end, which made it a decent fantasy day for those who took the chance on him this week. But I think that you can definitely count on him to get that type of work. We saw how they were using Carlos Hyde earlier on in the season. He was a viable, efficient running back, and they like to run the ball towards the goal line. So I think that Chubb definitely has cemented himself as a running back 2 at worst, heading down the stretch to the end of the season.
Now, Kevin, we talked about it last week, and I brought up the numbers, and you were like, "Come on, give him a chance already." And they took Carlos Hyde and traded him because I'm pretty sure you got it done.
Brass is linked to the fantasy football funhouse.
Another guy who we felt just needed to get the right amount of touches is Kerryon Johnson. We spoke about him earlier. And with Theo Riddick out and LeGarrette Blount being a plotter along the lines of Jamal Williams. You can see his face.
All right.
Kerryon Johnson got season high in snaps, 38, and carries, 19. And he ran for 158 yards. He averaged 8.3 yards a carry. He saw 3 targets, 2 receptions, 21 yards. We see 0 touchdowns. And if you didn't watch the game, you would say, oh, LeGarrette Blount got the short touchdown again. And just give it to LeGarrette Blount. But Kerryon Johnson carried the ball 4 times inside the 11, and 2 of those came inside the 2-yard line. He just could not push the pile and get in the end zone. They gave him the opportunity on Blount's first touchdown or only touchdown. They gave him the opportunity first, and only after he got stuffed did they bring Blount in. So I think that they want to give this kid the chance now, but they also know, hey, all right, he didn't get it that first time. We know Blount's got the legs and the power to do this. We put him in there. So very nice usage, and I hope that it continues at a Kerryon, Steve.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. He's somebody that, you had a lot of hype on him coming into the season, so you drafted him, had him on your bench early on. It didn't seem like he was getting a lot of play, but as the season's gone on, he's gotten more and more and more. Obviously looks like the best running back in that backfield. It's not going to be long before, he's almost up in that running back 2 every week category as well. I think that if they're going to continue to give him that volume, we talked about how Detroit's definitely coming along as a team as the season goes on. I definitely like having him on a few of my squads, look forward to using him as a third running back in your flex spot at worst.
Okay, another guy we talked about last week, and I'll just say real quick about him. We'll move on. Tariq Cohen, for the first time in his career, saw 50% of the snaps in the offense. 3rd straight week with at least 8 targets. He ended up pulling in 12 targets for 8 receptions, 69 yards, and a touchdown. He has been a top 10 fantasy running back over the last 3 weeks. And at the obviously dismay of Kevin and Jordan Howard ownership. Over in New Orleans, we saw what was essentially a dead split this week. Alvin Kamara, 39 snaps, and Mark Ingram's 35. Kamara saw more touches, 17, 64, and a touchdown, and each guy got 2 targets and caught both for 10 and 11 yards. Ingram only 12 for 32, so after the big return down week for him. The guy who's cutting into their carries, guys, is Hill, the backup quarterback, who they're using in all kinds of ways. He has 6 carries inside the 20 and 3 inside the 10 on the season. And if you're an owner of one of those 2 running backs, or you're a Drew Brees owner, as nice of a season as Drew Brees is having, it's very frustrating when you see this guy come on the field, because much like Lamar Jackson, who finally got a rushing touchdown this week, and I'm sure it upsets the Flacco owners who are not as plentiful as the Breeze owners, it's got to be frustrating. Kevin, when you see that guy,
I hate this guy. I hate this guy. I hate this guy. I hate everything about him. I hate everything about Sean Payton's love affair with him. I hate everything about when he's on the field, because it's awful all around. It hurts everyone in fantasy. You can't put Hill on your fantasy team. You can't start him running back. You might even go on deep. You can't do that. This guy, and all he does is take touches away from Alvin Breeze, from everything. He ruins everything.
Kevin's upset,
and he's ugly.
If you can't tell, Kevin is upset and he's ugly. Yeah, wow.
Well, I shouldn't have said that. That was mean.
This is getting personal. Yeah. Actually, you mentioned the Joe Flacco owners. I had Joe Flacco in as a streaming quarterback on Russell Wilson's bye week last week. So, yeah, although he did do well, he was a serviceable fill-in. Seeing Lamar Jackson come in and get that touchdown was kind of sucked.
Flacco was my sleeper last week.
Because I had Flacco as well. And you know what sucked about that is they're freaking point. Gaining 4 points from all Ravens. That gave me.
If anybody wants to know what Kevin's saying, I'm going to release the transcript.
They're gonna think I bleeped all this out.
Kevin, maybe you want to click out and click back on real quick. Your last rant was almost incoherent.
What you saw right there was Kevin thinks he might have finally said something funny and no one ever heard it.
Kevin, oh boy, if you don't watch the show live, you missed it. That was pretty funny.
Oh man.
Steve, while we're waiting for Kevin to figure out his business,
let's carry on without him. We've got a time line to hit here.
Let's talk about Kareem Hunt, who has been on an absolute tear in recent weeks. And Kareem Hunt was a guy at the beginning of the year and at the end of last year had basically fallen out of favor as part of the passing game. He was completely uninvolved in the passing game, and that has turned around. And with that has turned around his season. He comes in as the number 2 overall ranked running back over the last 3 weeks. And I'm just going to give you his number. I'm going to give you his numbers over the last 4 weeks. Total yardage from scrimmage, 175, 94, 185, and 141. 6 total touchdowns, and he's seen 18 targets in that time, which is a big improvement. And he's put up some monster weeks. He had a 5-reception, 105-yard, and a touchdown game 2 weeks ago, 5 for 55 and 2 receiving this past week. 3 total touchdowns in that game. That offense is unstoppable. That's right. I actually beat myself out.
Yeah, it was. I think I saw a stat. I wish I could remember who it was. I'm not as good as Sal is writing down who these stats come from, saying that Kareem Hunt's targets in the first 3 weeks of the year. Yeah, I'm going to need that notebook. The first 3 weeks of the year, he had 3 targets total. Last week alone, he had 4 red zone targets. So the offense has definitely shifted a little bit. They are definitely utilizing him a bit more. I love, obviously, as an owner of him, you love the way that he's being used. You hope that it keeps up. It's a little scary knowing that he was off to a certain type of, or a very similar tear like this last year and then kind of disappeared towards the middle of the season. Hopefully Andy Reid won't do that to him again.
Hopefully Andy Reid doesn't piss down his leg, eh? Hey, Kev? Thumbs up from Kevin.
All right. He approved of that comment. I actually acquired Kareem Hunt in a 10-team half-point PPR league today, and I want to know what you think of this, Sal. I gave up James White and T.Y. Hilton for Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I like James White for what he is, but Kareem Hunt will definitely put up bigger yardage totals and most likely touchdown totals. I mean, James White is off to a great start, but yeah, that's a solid deal. T.Y. Hilton, you know, who knows what's going to go on over there with Eric Ebron taking all those touchdowns.
Jack Doyle practicing coming back. Goodbye, Ebron.
I hope. Well, by the way, he caught touchdowns in those first couple of weeks when Doyle was still there. I hope Kevin is able to come back on when we get to the Michael Roberts portion of the episode. He didn't even smile when I said that. All right, we talked about Odell Beckham Jr. and Sterling Shepard. Let's talk about Jarvis Landry. Jarvis Landry was the number 4.
Bless him.
You bless him. Number 4 wide receiver this week with a whopping 15 targets, 10 receptions, 97 yards, and a touchdown. Since Baker Mayfield has taken over, Jarvis Landry leads the team in target share at 27%, air yards at 30%, red zone targets at 8%, and he has double-digit targets in every game. Steve.
Yes.
Do you know who Jarvis Landry's next 3 opponents are?
I don't, Sal. Will you tell me?
This week they played the 30th ranked against wide receiver Pittsburgh Steelers.
Ooh.
The following week they played the defensively challenged pass defense of the Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh.
And then they finished that 3-game stretch against the Atlanta Falcons, the 31st ranked team against wide receivers. He has an insane next 3 weeks coming up. And I would try to grab Jarvis Landry right now, get him in your lineup, and then trade him as he's going to the bye week after they play Atlanta. I mean, that's if you want to learn how to, be a shark in fantasy football, that's how you do it. Grab this guy now, put him in your lineup for 3 weeks, get him out.
Yeah, and I mean, you saw what they just did against Tampa Bay, who has an equally awful secondary in pass defense. So if they were able to do that, a lot of that was garbage time, and that might just be what you have to get from Cleveland. That's what we've expected from them for the last 20 years. So they're doing what they do. And Baker Mayfield, very competent quarterback. Jarvis Landry, very good possession wide receiver, getting a ton of targets right now. Obviously, get him if you can. It might be a little expensive now because of that last week that he just had, but definitely kick the tires and see what's going on with him.
Third, leading the league in air yards, buddy. Forget that possession receiver crap.
What, the Browns are leading it? I said Jarvis Landry is a good possession receiver.
He's leading the team.
I know. I understand that.
Yeah.
That's just because of the volume.
Air
yards add up.
David Njoku was number 6 this week overall in tight ends. These are his last 2 weeks. Week 6, 12 targets, 7 receptions, 55 yards and a touchdown. This past week, just 6 targets, but put in 4 for 52 and a touchdown. This is a guy that should be in your lineup now every week. He's clearly at least the number 2 target. Duke Johnson is not getting the targets that we thought he would get there. So I like what I'm seeing out of Njoku. Emmanuel Sanders, basically a day after Kevin said he would slow down, went out and passed for Kevin's face. He passed for a touchdown.
Nice.
And then he caught 6 balls for 102 yards on a touchdown. And he's steaming right along. I know that make you happy, Steve. Now, Steve, let's talk about this. I don't know how much time we have left. I don't even know what time we came on the air.
Not a lot.
We had heard rumors about Demaryius Thomas possibly being on the block to be traded. And Denver has come out and said they're not going to move him. Most likely he's going to stay, but they have a lot of offers for Emmanuel Sanders. Would it piss you off if they traded Emmanuel Sanders right now?
Yeah, it would. I wouldn't like to see Demaryius Thomas go either, but I think because he's been a Bronco. He's been a good Bronco. And, it's more of a sentimental thing. I understand it if he had to move on with the contract and all that kind of stuff. I get that. But I would like to see Demaryius Thomas stay. I understand that it's probably not going to happen, but I really would like to see Emmanuel Sanders stay. He's been a great Bronco since he's come over as well. You just mentioned how well he played last week and how well he's done this season. I think that having either one of those guys is a good thing for Cortland Sutton and Deshaun Hamilton. They're 2 young rookie wide receivers. I think they need at least one of those guys to stay there to teach these younger guys and to take some pressure off of them, because if they both go, then defenses are going to be able to focus in on Cortland Sutton, and it's not going to be exactly the same. I would definitely like to see at least Emmanuel Sanders stay, and if not both of them, at least throughout the rest of the remainder of this season.
Okay, last wide receiver. We talked about this guy last week as well, Terrell Williams. They're on a bye week this week, but if for some reason he's sitting out there on a waiver or as a free agent in your league, he should be added at this point. We saw a lot of targets going to him in a red zone earlier in the year. And in the last 2 weeks, he's had 118 yards in each week, the exact same total, and he's got 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games. And that's what Mike Williams getting a big touchdown this past week there. They're finding a way to keep this guy involved. He should absolutely be on your team. I've been lucky enough to be putting him in a lineup, Capos Pigs 3, just because my roster is so poor, and he's been fantastic for me. I hope Kevin, click on. Let's see if we could hear you. He had the game on. He had the sound on the game. The son of a bitch. He had the music.
No. I actually didn't. So I think what happened was, and I don't know if you can hear me better now, if I'm choppy or whatnot.
So good. Get your point.
Yeah. So having the game on through a Roku stick in my basement seems to be draining the Wi-Fi. So I think that may have been the issue. So when you asked me to click back on, I turned the TV off. However, the bases are loaded right now, and they're about to come up with I think Pierce is coming up. So it's either Pierce
I'll let you know what happens.
JD Martinez. So anyway, what's your question there?
It's working beautiful on my Fire Stick. Maybe should upgrade. My question for you is, Michael Roberts, should we be adding him in fantasy football?
No, you should not. No, you should not add Michael Roberts. Jeez, I don't understand it. Because more efficient.
He almost can't be more efficient.
You know what? For those of you who were unable to hear my rant about the Raiders Baltimore game or the Ravens New Orleans Saints game, this is even worse. Michael Roberts is terrible. He's not good at football.
Well, that's
I don't think you can say that. I don't think you can say that.
How could you say that about him?
He's not good at football.
Based on because he's legitimately had 2 opportunities to play, and he scored 3 touchdowns in those 2 games.
That's pretty good. I gotta say,
Better
that's
if
pretty
he's more
good.
efficient. He's more efficient than Will Fuller. I'll give him that. That's impressive. No one's a better touchdown rate than Will Fuller.
And Dante
But,
Moncrief as well. More efficient than Dante Moncrief on the Colts.
I'll tell you something that's funny.
Yeah.
So I have, we all know my Michael Roberts love. I have on a lot of dynasty teams. But I have on a lot of best ball also. So he scored a lot of points for me in different best ball leagues this week and Koth leagues. But I actually had him in one dynasty where I was tanking. The bastard scored 23 points.
I was just going to ask you about that. You mentioned Tyrell Williams, and you mentioned him being on your Pigs 3 roster and how you've been starting him because your roster's so awful. How do you feel about that as a team that's trying to tank? You throw in somebody, you're just like, oh, I'll throw in Deshaun Watson or Deshaun Jackson this week because I'm trying to not score any points. And then he goes up for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. How does that feel as a supposed tanker when your team comes through for you unexpectedly?
It's awful. You know who's been doing it to me all season? Cordarrelle Patterson. I haven't been on it. It's Cordarrelle Patterson. The guy scored a touchdown every week. Somehow or another, he gets into the end zone every week. Anyway, boys, that's it for this week. Let's wrap it up as the Red Sox get a run walked in. Kevin, it is now 2-2. Wrap it up, Steve.
It's actually 4-2 now as JD Martinez gets a 2-run scoring base hit.
Way to ruin a surprise.
Yeah, dating this podcast. Everyone knows exactly what's going on when this podcast was recorded now. Anyway, thank you guys for listening to this episode of the Fantasy Football Funhouse. You can find us on Twitter at FF Funhouse. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram. You can also check out fantasyfootballfunhouse.com, which houses this podcast and the Gut Feels podcast from our friends Jason Tran and Derek McCreath. So go ahead and listen to all that fun stuff.
Did you call them our friends?
I mean, they're my friends.
It's generous.
They're going to deny that.
Not only generous, but
It's
also
really
kind of sad for you.
That's right. If those are your friends, I guess yeah, it makes sense. No, I get it. Steve, have you ever thought about being Canadian?
Thought about it. Universal healthcare.
Get a good price on a conversion.
They legalized a bunch of stuff this year too.
You'd have the whole year off for this kid, not just 6 weeks.
That's true. Let's talk about their paternity leave. My God,
I'm not sure that it's Jason gone back to work yet.
I don't think he
has. I don't think he has a job. I think this whole kid thing was made up. I think he stopped working.
He was just fired one time and made up this whole entire
like, I had a kid, so I don't work anymore.
Wow, that's elaborate. I have seeing as we spoke about this, that took up my time for my closing thought, and I have nothing to say. I've talked too much. Go ahead, Kevin.
Everyone that Sal writes for Fanball, you can check him out at fanball.com. Check out the author page; it'll give you all the details of all the good stuff that he's writing out there. Also, remind everyone to add a charity aspect to your fantasy experience. It will make the whole thing better. Get your group together to donate some money or donate some time and help those in need.
I had Chris Herndon as my sleeper tight end last week over there, Fanball.
Oh, fanball.com, were you right?
Yeah, sleeper tight end, Chris Herndon. Nailed it.
So,
how many lineups did you have him in?
None.
That's what I thought.
I don't own him.
And
I don't know.
Paul Alito, who you can sometimes hear on SiriusXM Radio, will be back later in the week. At least.
Well, Steve and I might be back. We can't hear what the hell Kevin's saying, but join us later in the week for the preview show where Kevin will be perfectly ready with all his over-unders and letting us, Steve and I, pick what fantasy points. Thank you for enjoying the Fantasy Football Funhouse.